Hello and welcome to the Edge EcoCast event. Today's topic is enabling edge environments. I'm thankful to be joined by experts at Scale Computing and Flexential. I'm also so grateful for our wonderful audience who has chosen to join us today. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you, and we appreciate your support of the MegaCast and EcoCast events. Hello to everyone out there. I see comments coming in from California, New Jersey, Scottsdale, Arizona, sunny Pennsylvania, let's see, Detroit, just so many places out there, Texas, South Carolina, Denver, all around the United States and all around the world. So thank you so much for everyone out there taking time to join us on the event today. Before we jump into it, I have a little bit of housekeeping here we need to cover. We want this to be an educational event. Edge computing is a hot new topic. Everyone wants to learn about it. Everyone has questions. That's normal. We want your questions. So use that questions box there in the console there, just to the right of where it says handouts. Click on questions. If you haven't been in there already and said good morning or hello, go ahead and check it out now. That's where we encourage your questions about today's topics. We will have dedicated Q&A sessions with each of our presenters on the event today, so we'll be queuing up the best questions for those sessions. So get your technical questions about edge computing in early. We also have a few poll questions for you out there. We, of course, appreciate your participation in those polls. The polls will show up there in the slides window, and I'll call your attention to those when they come up. We also want this to be a social event. We'll be tweeting about the event over on Twitter. You can tweet directly from your console using the Twitter icon on the bottom of the screen. The hashtag for today's event is ATM EcoCast. If you click in the box there next to the ATM EcoCast hashtag and type a message like I love the ATM EcoCast or whatever it might be, click submit and it will be automatically posted over on Twitter. Of course, if this is the first time you've done it with this platform, the Twitter authorization will apply. We also have a number of resources for the audience there in the Handouts tab. Check out the Handouts tab. It says Scale Computing and Flexential. Those are two downloadable PDFs. You can download those and check them out after the event. And then finally, prizes. Some of you may have heard we had some prizes to give away. We'll be giving out 3 Amazon $500 gift cards on the event today. You must be live to qualify for the drawing. There are a number of other prize terms and conditions. Those can be found in the Handouts tab there. If you click on ATM prize terms at the bottom of the Handouts tab, all prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to ActualTech Media. Now, ActualTech Media has partnered with Direct Relief. Direct Relief is an excellent charity who is fighting the coronavirus or COVID-19. And until COVID-19 is beat, we at ActualTech Media will be donating $500 to Direct Relief for every MegaCast, EcoCast, and Summit event that we run. So thank you for supporting these events because it helps us to support the Direct Relief charity. I have placed a link there in the Handouts tab to the Direct Relief charity. If you would like to check it out, if you would like to donate on behalf of yourself or behalf of your company, of course, we encourage that. We've also partnered this year with the One Tree Planted and the Diane Fossey Gorilla Guide Fund. If you would be interested in donating to those, of course, those are an option as well. That is through the Gorilla.guide partnership. At gorilla.guide. If you visit that, you can download a cartload of free enterprise technology books. That URL is gorilla.guide. Again, the hashtag for today's event on Twitter is ATM EcoCast. You can follow ActualTech Media on Twitter. You can follow me as well. I am David M. Davis, and I'm honored to be your moderator for today's event. I want to call your attention on the top right-hand side of your console. You can subscribe to the ActualTech Media social media channels, YouTube, Facebook, the 10 on Tech podcast, and our LinkedIn channel. You can visit all of those. We post all of our latest and greatest content over on LinkedIn, so make sure you follow us there. And now I'm excited to introduce you to Mr. Scott D. Lowe, CEO of ActualTech Media, who is going to give us a quick primer on the state of edge computing and what edge computing is and how edge computing can help you. I'll hand it now over to Scott.
You know, it really wasn't all that long ago. Okay, maybe it was, that everything in IT happened in a local data center or in a co-located data center of some kind. As you, I hope, are aware, things are a bit different these days, and we have new environments and new challenges to overcome. Now, if you haven't done anything with cloud, you're very much in the minority, but it's still something people are trying to grapple with. You know, the local data center is not, well, it's not necessarily a solved problem. It's much closer to being a solved problem than what we're doing with cloud these days. There's lots of inefficiencies that are being introduced with cloud, overspend, a complexity around multi-cloud adoption, things like that. But it's provided organizations with an alternative way to deploy workloads that didn't exist all that long ago. And it's provided organizations with a new economic model, although not one without challenges. You know, we have these issues of cloud cost management, governance, and sprawling workload environments and multi-cloud deployments that we have to overcome. One of the other challenges that's facing IT as far as changes go are new ways to support robo, what we're calling now the edge, as part of the edge. So robo stands for remote office branch office, and it used to be an entity or an area unto itself. But it's really, that term has become something new. We call it the edge. Now, the definition of the edge is dependent on who you talk to. But in general, it's a term to describe a location at which data is created. And this can include our traditional robo environments, remote office, branch office environments, which can include sprawling locations such as supermarket chains, other retail establishments, and lots more. But there's more. Data gathering is one need when we think about the edge. And this idea of data being processed locally is gaining much more traction than it used to. It used to be that we would think about we can gather data at the edge and send it to the cloud for processing. And in some ways, that's still true for a lot of data. But imagine the case, for example, of a supermarket that's offline. The internet connection is down, and the redundant connection is down, whatever. You don't want those stores to be down because their systems are down. So there has to be local processing, and there is. Lots of companies are solving the robo issue to help these sprawling environments do IT efficiently. But if we look at newer types of applications, let's take self-driving cars, for example, or agricultural equipment. The latency involved in trips to the cloud can be difficult for these applications to absorb. In the case of self-driving cars, let's take a case where an electric vehicle is driving down the road and a pedestrian walks out in front of it. Do we want that self-driving car to have a 15 millisecond latency while it uploads data to the cloud to determine whether or not it should hit the human? Probably not. I think we want the car to decide to swerve or to do some other activity, such as hit the brakes really hard, so we don't kill someone. And when we look at agricultural equipment, for example, these have low or no bandwidth. They have to be able to make decisions based on local conditions, and there has to be processing power on these pieces of equipment to be able to make that happen. The technologies are here today to do this, and there's lots of them out there. You know, we've seen the rise of artificial intelligence, machine learning technologies that are helping with things like agricultural equipment, self-driving vehicles, things like that. These are basically mobile data centers that have their own processing power and don't have to rely on centralized cloud services to make decisions. And if we look at other technologies supporting edge environments, hyperconverged infrastructure is a big one for robo environments. We see Internet of Things technologies as data gathering points for sensor data acquisition. And we're going to see the rise of 5G mobile technology as supporting all of this for those times when we do have to have interconnectivity, even whether it's local or whether it's from an edge environment to a cloud environment. This doesn't mean that the edge will never talk to a data center or to the cloud. It's just that these environments have to be self-sustaining in some way, and those are going to be challenges that are to be overcome over the next few years.
All right, very insightful presentation there on edge computing, what it is, how it works, why you need it, different use cases. Appreciate that insight from Scott Lowe. And now I've just brought up a poll question. You should see that on the screen. And we'll just run this poll question here for a minute before I introduce you to our first presenter on today's event. The poll question on the screen is, what's your time frame for adding new IT solutions at your company? So you answer that question just right there in the slides window. Just select the option that corresponds to you and your company. All right, thank you everyone for answering that poll question. Let's get started with today's Edge EcoCast. It's now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Matt McPhail, Global Director of Systems Engineering at Scale Computing. Matt, are you there?
Good morning.
Good morning, Matt. Yeah, thank you for being on. Take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So from here, what I wanted to talk about today was really off of what Scott just talked about, which was enabling edge environments. So my name is Matt McPhail. I'm the Senior Director of Systems Engineering. A couple housekeeping items that I wanted to make sure that everyone realized. This is going to be a 1,000-foot view presentation. So if you need clarification on something, if you want me to go a little bit deeper, or if you have any specific questions, go ahead and put those in the questions bar. If David hasn't already talked about that, perfect. But if he has, my apologies for being redundant, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood from an audience perspective what I'm going to be talking about today. And then obviously, if you need more information, feel free to go to our website or follow up with us directly. And I would be remiss if I didn't call this out and make sure that I put an emphasis on this. I do hope that everyone is safe right now. I hope that everyone is with their families or able to give their families a hug right now. My kids just this morning got the news that there will be no school for the rest of the year for them. So after this call, I'm going to be going back inside and giving them big hugs and seeing how their virtual homework's going. So with that, I'll take it away. The agenda that I wanted to define for you guys today is I wanted to go through some of the problems when it comes to edge. I wanted to define what innovative edge is and then talk through a specific real-world example, because really, if you're thinking about innovative edge, you can think about it from many different ways, and I wanted to bring in at least a real-world example so you guys understood how it was developed and defined and what it covered off for at least this specific company. Edge is really, really broad. You can actually have it work in a lot of different areas. A lot of people are dealing with edge right now at their homework sites. So there's a lot of stuff to cover, so I will try to be as concise through this. And then last but not least, I want you to understand some of the specific edge-related technical challenges and what has been done to overcome that. So first of all, for anyone that doesn't know, I really want to define edge as anywhere outside of mission critical. So what we're talking about is cell towers. What we're talking about are ships in the middle of the North Sea. What we're talking about are a group of wireless PCs that are connected via daisy chain in the back of a remote office somewhere. Really, edge is anywhere where there are not defined walls associated within the data center, whether that's cloud or whether that's a corporate or business data center. And with that comes specific issues. You've got issues of downtime. Number one, you got issues of people. So downtime, all of the gamut. For anyone on here who's IT related, you understand all of the issues that have happened with downtime. The only thing is they get multiplied and magnified when they're at the edge because of the lack of HR or people issues. There's lack of on-site resources. There's lack of training. The deployment time, if you're not careful, can get ludicrously long, and you have all the other things that are associated with preventing downtime, such as system maintenance, application, and security upgrades. So with that, the other issue is that the traditional approach doesn't work, where you've got a lot of complexity, and that complexity feeds into all of the different edge needs, but that's got to be outside the core because it does not work to stay in core due to latency issues, due to the compliancy perhaps, due to the fact that there's just isn't enough time to move directly from a defined environment into an undefined edge or remote office branch environment. And using specific hardware associated with that doesn't necessarily work either, because say you put a low-end system into a remote office site. That could be as little as 64 gigs worth of RAM. A traditional operating system or a traditional operating system plus a virtualization engine can take at least 24 gigs of that. Well, that works if you've got enough hardware or enough space for being able to deploy that, but what if you're trying to cut costs? What if you don't have the space? What if people aren't available to define a specific amount of hardware that they need? What if it's just too much? What if 64 gigs worth of RAM is too much? Now what you're talking about is if you try to deploy 32 gigs, most of it's being taken up by system resources. Or in a traditional environment, if you're trying to go down as low as 16 or 8 gigs, you've got an overage. So what you've now got to think about from a paradigm perspective is you got to look at this as, okay, I now need software that can handle the edge platform, that can do virtual machines, that can handle anything, but it's got to be in an operating platform that's extremely light from a software perspective. That way, I'm not leveraging all of my hardware purchases just in being able to run the software and not being able to run any of the resources. Because let's face facts. The underlying operating platform, that's going to be your engine, but it's those applications that are making money. You tie that all in, you've got to have a way to centralize and centrally manage it. There has to be an interface that is clean, that you're able to get in and get out, and you're also able to make sure that everything is working properly within those edge deployments. And it has to be from anywhere. It can't be only at the edge site. You have to be able to access it from a NOC that's 2,000 miles away. But if you're not available because of the time zone issue, then specifically what you're talking about is you have to have something that can intelligently monitor too. There's a concept out there called state machines, which are essentially little bits of AI code that can intelligently check conditions and be able to automatically take actions. You have to have some form or fashion of this, because if you're trying to do break fix from a NOC in Central Europe to an edge deployment that's in Malaysia, if you're a retail store, it's not going to work. You have to have a way to be able to do it automatically, not only to get in front of the time zone issue, but just to get in front of the basic break fix that's going to be there. And that's exactly what this customer did. So Delhaize is a very large grocery retailer. You may have heard of them also from some of their brands. Food Lion is a big one, Giant's a big one, Peapod's ones you may have heard of as well. But they ran into a number of market challenges. Internet challenges were ramping up. As a brick and mortar store, they saw Amazon as a huge competitor. And shopping is an event, especially now. Right now, shopping is an event. So they wanted to make sure that consumer demand became a seamless experience. It could be live no matter where they were. If they're doing it online, it could be as live as possible. If they were in front in a store, they could get some of the benefits of the online experience at the live store, and there had to be a form of innovation behind it. But they ran into some of those challenges that I just spoke about, where there's no in-store expertise, it's expensive to maintain, you've got downtime issues, and there's not a lot of space, quite frankly. And for the space that is there, anyone can access it. So you've got physical security issues, and anyone that's there, all of the specific applications that are running are not able to be taken care of and have to be on a platform that supports it all. So looking at their deployment, so let's go a little bit deeper into their deployment. They had a number of different areas they wanted to make sure were handled by this. Specifically, number one, they had a specific infrastructure need. They had to worry about the specific asset optimization. So they had to track specific assets and whether or not they were being checked out automatically from the system itself. And they had cashierless checkout. So they were actively monitoring each of the different assets that are there in order to prevent shrink. From that, they also worried about the temperature for each of the different produce. That was all tracked through this environment. and the specific real-time price tracking. So anything that was being priced online was also being priced in the store through specific updatable SKUs and barcode readers. And then that online experience where they could get coupons online, they could save online, that was taken care of there. But they also had AI assist in the fact that they have roving robots, big googly eyes, for them to be able to leverage in order for customers to get their needs met directly there. Obviously, that all ties in with that cashierless checkout, and it is handled through that virtual infrastructure. All of it is tied together. So that screen that I showed you earlier, where all those different parts and pieces are there, from an edge perspective, they wanted to tie that in seamlessly. So how they did it was in a specific case that was lockable, came directly from a brand provider that you know, ran a specific amount of Lenovo servers with a very lightweight edge software on it. And the on-site installation was extremely limited because most of it is able to be handled directly from their NOC, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But all in, they were able to get it in at a very, very good price. And the apps were running in less than 30 minutes, and their cutover was less than 4 hours. So basically, in the time that it took them to cut over, they were closed in the middle of the night. So one of the quotes that we got directly from them was that since deploying this, they've had 0 minutes of downtime because it is that self-sufficient, but it also is that highly available. And there are a number of other customers that are doing exactly this. So here's just a list of some of them that are doing edge-style deployments. And it doesn't have to be retail. It doesn't have to be any specific vertical. This is a very horizontal need, especially right now, for being able to handle the environment from an edge perspective where you're talking about workload needs outside of that data center. So with that, let me jump into some of the other considerations that are there. So obviously form factor, that's going to be one big one. I showed you a little bit about the form factor earlier, but you're going to have noise concerns, you're going to have power concerns, you're going to have deployment options that are associated with that. And those deployment options are going to be down to not only management of each of those different applications, whether it's AI-based or whether it's remotely managed, but you're also going to have to worry about those installations and orchestrations as well. And then on top of that, I haven't touched upon this yet. I wanted to make sure that I did because it is a big consideration. It's going to be a networking based upon the costs, based upon the ports that are available, and based upon the infrastructure. So first of which, let's go back to the efficiency around the amount of hardware there. So what you're talking about is to be able to fit into the size that is required for those style of deployments to really get the value out of deploying at the edge. You have to deploy on that software that is able to give you the amount of resources that you need to run. If it's 10 VMs, if it's 3 VMs, it doesn't matter. You've got to be able to get real value out of that specific hardware. So again, hardware that's designed and software that's designed for self-healing operations, that's ultra efficient, it's got redundancy, and all of the things that are designed to handle those workloads, whether it's just those applications that can be in there to future-proof or just licensing options to be able to handle those applications to be able to deploy them very easily. And then obviously all of that has to be customizable as well. So when you're talking form factor, it can be something as large as a tower. It could be something, a rack mountable system. It could be a half rack mountable system, or it could be a cluster as easy to deploy as this. And what you're talking about are just some Intel NUC in a cluster, all talking through a very commodity-based switch there on the background and a very low-end consumer-based APC unit. We've got a customer, Jerry's Foods, that's done exactly that. The amount that they were able to save on their UPS alone justify the cost of those. And the deployment options could be in many different requirements as well. You can need a single system. You can need a dual system. You can need a full cluster. All of that has to be able to work within the software, and the software has to be okay with that to be able to deploy it. And then from there, what you're talking about is you've got the ability to manage it. And I'm not talking about managing it locally, because again, you don't have that in-house expertise. You've got to be able to manage it remotely. And that management, it doesn't necessarily have to only be break fix. It's also got to be the ability to do custom imaging and deployment, phone home. And you've got to have the ability to centralize management, all of the different sites. So we're not talking about managing one site, we're talking about managing thousands of sites across a multi-system and multi-cluster management console. Something very similar to this, where you can see here, you got graphs at the bottom, you've got all your specific sites, you've got the ability to handle automation there. You've got tie-ins with all of your logs. And then what you also have is the ability to drill into each of the different sites, run automation tools through APIs and Ansible projects, but also do self-deployment. One of the beautiful things about Edge is that when deployed properly, all you have to do is plug in your environment for that new site, and it automatically recognizes what it is via DHCP, where it is, calls back to that centralized console, and that portal sends not only the installation task that it needs to do to get everything up and running, but it also is able to download every one of the site-specific VMs associated with that. You want an Edge deployment to be able to do that. I mean, especially right now where at some locations, including here in California, it's hard to go on site right now. If you can have someone that can plug in a system, you can do everything else remotely from a true Edge style deployment. And that ties in with the networking as well. So traditional networking, switches are expensive, switch ports are expensive, the hardware is smaller with fewer ports. You have to worry about isolation, and you have to worry about microsegmentation with that. With Edge, you can build that into the fabric where you can have everything interlinked, all the specific Edge deployments interlinked across each of the different NICs. And then you can have them connect directly to that consumer-based switch. That way, the fabric itself on the networking side of that Edge deployment becomes the distribution bridge. Everything is available to the uplink, and all uplinks are active and able to pass through. So that if you lose one, you're still fine. If you lose two, you're still fine because you still have that first link upwards to your LAN environment, and you're still able to interconnect because those systems are still set up to be in an HA environment. Very similar to this. Again, 3 wireless nanos daisy-chained in between one another. And the only thing when you're talking about a wire is that power down there at the bottom. So, in summary, the needs for edge computing have grown because of the amount of data that's out at specific sites, because of the need for resiliency at those sites. A lot of edge-style deployments cannot handle anything remotely associated with being able to not have any latency or have any resiliency because of the regulation associated with that. So what do? If you have the proper software, Edge is as easy as a small deployment that can then move to any location through a portal that works seamlessly from within that environment. So, with that, I believe I've hit my 20-minute time limit, so I am going to break for questions.
Great presentation. Really cool, Matt. Actually, while we do some questions, and I appreciate you putting your email address up there for anyone who wants to contact you. It's on the screen, matt@scalecomputing.com. But while we do some questions here, I'm just going to bring up this poll for the audience. The poll says, what additional information would you like about the Scale Computing solution? I'll just leave that up. So let's see, Matt, first question that came in here, they're asking Is Lenovo your machine of choice, and if so, why?
Oh, great question. So we do have a very good relationship with Lenovo. Lenovo has been key to our OEM development, and we find that a lot of our deployments are on Lenovo just because of the versatility. I would say that we do run on other platforms as well, but Lenovo has been, again, very good to us, and we want to make sure that we standardize on the OEMs that really have tried to work hard with defining what it means to deploy in the edge. Not everyone has gotten there yet on a software perspective, and we're proud that our partnership with Lenovo has been able to get us there.
Okay, okay, excellent. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I appreciate some of the hellos from all over the country. It's nice to see that everyone's doing well. So thank you. Keep those coming in the questions as well.
Absolutely, yeah. We got a lot of great audience feedback here on your presentation as well. They said great presentation. Another question here was around the HC3 Edge Scale Management. I actually took a screenshot of that. I really love the UI on it. Kind of what's the architecture on that? I mean, if you have a central site and you have multiple edge locations, like where is that edge user interface deployed? How is it, accessed? How's that work?
Great question. So think of that portal as available where your typical NOC is available. So your operations center, you're going to have that portal there, and you're going to be able to access it from anywhere. So that's going to likely deploy in a core or in a very highly available edge deployment, and you're going to be able to access that from anywhere. So what we're talking about is a custom management portal that allows you to not only access any style of deployment that you have anywhere in the world, but you can access it from anywhere in the world as well.
Okay, excellent. Another question here is about, in your opinion, what's the most important aspect of edge deployments? What should people look for?
That's a great question. So I touched on that a little bit earlier on, and so I wanted to make sure that I hit this home. When you guys are looking to deploy edge, it really does have to come down to efficiency. You don't want to spend extra money on hardware that you're not going to use. You want, if you're hearing anything else, it really comes down to make sure that your edge deployment is efficient, because if you're having to do 10 of these, an efficient edge deployment is going to save you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. If you're having to do thousands of these, like Delhaize did, it's going to save you millions of dollars just in making sure that everything is efficient.
Very nice. Very nice. Great point. Next question, does edge only apply to retail?
That's a great question. No. Again, edge is anything that is outside of the standard core data center or cloud. You can do edge deployments in retail. We've done edge deployments on cell towers. We've done edge deployments out at oil derricks. Although most of our edge deployments are at remote offices across a standard enterprise deployment. And what's nice about it is that an enterprise or a medium-sized business with multiple different sites, they can not only standardize on the edge piece, but they can leverage that to replicate back to their core, because the software that you're seeing to manage everything can not only manage the edge, but it can manage the core as well.
And follow up to that, I mean, when does an edge deployment become just another data center? Is there a certain number of nodes? When you get to 5 nodes or 10 nodes, well, that's not edge anymore? Or is it more of a management paradigm?
I would say that it's more of a location and management paradigm. So that's a great question. Obviously, when you're looking at edge is going to be in a location that does not necessarily have standard power. It doesn't necessarily have redundant power. It's not going to necessarily be in a secure location. It's not going to be in a standardized data center or in the cloud. Heck, it's not going to be in a normal room. We've had edge deployments in conference rooms, in bathrooms, in odd closets, or we've had edge deployments underneath the countertops of specific chain restaurants. It really does not matter.
I like that. Okay. Another question, how do I migrate from existing infrastructure to edge hardware?
Great question. So think about edge as you would any other virtual environment. So if you have expertise in migrating to a virtual environment, you're going to have expertise in migrating to edge. Everything is still virtualized. Everything is still managed like you would manage a virtual environment. And so edge just becomes a very efficient deployment of what you're already doing on software that can handle it.
Okay. Here's a question here. Ranjan is asking, do you have any examples of edge in banking or finance?
Oh, absolutely. We have, and you see it in different locations first. So credit unions have been very, very keen on wanting to save money just because they're traditionally more nonprofit. So we see credit unions actually moving there first because this is a way for them to save money for their members. But although we've also seen it deployed at other financial institutions that are looking that are kind of around the big banks, but we've had great discussions with some of the larger banks. I was doing an edge seminar down in South Florida, and we were talking to some of the larger banks there, such as Wells Fargo and Bank of America, and they actually have key initiatives around being able to do this for their branch offices. And I mean, right now for them, being able to do an edge style deployment from a branch office actually enables a lot of their brokers, a lot of their tellers to work in remote locations when they might not otherwise be able to, especially key right now.
Yeah, I can see that, especially in these kind of small, like video terminals almost that they want to do for remote tellers. Yeah.
But you have to have the security, and you have to have the efficiency to be able to do that, and you can't do that with traditional software very easily.
That's right. Yeah, great point. Follow up to that, they said you mentioned that the edge beats the cloud in terms of physics. Can you elaborate a bit more?
Oh, yeah. So it truly comes down to speed of light. One of the examples is you can actually do better real-time updates for pricing if they're done batched the night before and they're rolled out to each of the different sites as necessary at given specific times. One of the other things is if you have an AI deployment at an edge retail, it can actually quickly enable shrink to be recognized through the use of cameras. And we're talking about the difference of milliseconds between someone being able to quickly put something away and leave versus being able to process that real time on site. So it truly does come down to the latency as opposed to cloud. And I will say this also, if you're looking at a edge style deployment, would you trust an AT&T or a Comcast account going directly to them from a network perspective? If that link goes down, you have lost business. So you have to have some form of edge there in order to just account for outages in network.
Yeah, great point. Great point. I mean, these are going to be critical locations out there. What they're doing, you can't always count on the last mile. Follow-up question here from Seth. He's asking, do you believe edge computing requires a change to your organization's operating model?
Yes and no. So one of the things that you can look at is if you have an operating model that requires a specific set of traditional hardware or traditional software, obviously you can't deploy that at edge. So you would make those change. But if you're talking about the ability to enhance your current operational model through the use of edge, because now everything can be centrally located and you can manage everything locally, and you don't have to worry about sending out people break fix, then it does enhance it, and you don't have to change it that much. You just make it better in that regard. So there is nuance to being able to define that question, but I would say yes and no. So Contact me afterwards, and I'll give you a very, very long and descriptive reason on the yeses and nos. Thank you for that question.
Okay, excellent. Follow-up question here from Seth as well. How can we get pricing information? What do you recommend?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So there's going to be contact information for us, Scale Computing, afterwards. And then we're also going to send out white papers to anyone that is interested in it. There's going to be contact information in the white papers as well. So also, if you have any specific questions, feel free to contact me directly through my email. I'm more than happy to work with you guys. Part of my role is not only enabling my team internally, but also enabling anyone externally that needs more information around Edge. I love doing it.
All right. Well, excellent presentation. Really cool, cutting edge stuff that you all are doing at Scale Computing. Matt, thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
For more information on Scale Computing, of course, check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console. You can also visit scalecomputing.com and watch your email for additional information from Scale Computing as well. By the way, the white paper that's available for download there in the handouts tab is how to enable on-premises edge computing. It's 11 pages, lots of good info in there, so make sure that you check that one out. And now it's time for our first Amazon $500 gift card winner. We have a gift card going to Neil Kitt from Nebraska. Congratulations, Neil Kitt from Nebraska. We'll be giving out 2 more gift cards after the next presentation, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. All right, and with that, I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on the Edge EcoCast. That is Mr. Tim Parker, Vice President of Network Strategy at Flexential. Tim, are you there?
I am. Thank you for that great introduction and great information from Matt. We're going to today go into the state of the edge. You know, it's been about 2 years, and we're going to talk a little bit about where it's at. It's a little higher level view from what Matt presented. It's more around how do we deliver data back and forth from that edge. And, you know, one of the keys that around there is how the interconnection plays and how do we make all of that work. So I'm going to dive right in. We'll go through it. I'll probably go through a little bit quick, but save your questions, and we'll be able to answer a lot of those at the end. So the edge, 2 years older. So about 2 years ago, we really started digging deep into the edge. You know, you started hearing press about the micro data centers and how we're going to distribute all that out there. And AI and IoT-driven technologies have just exploded, and they've begun to really drive a lot of initiatives. There's been a lot of talk around smart cities and remote health, and of course, autonomous vehicles get a lot out there, and then robotics and manufacturing. And we see that all of this is driving us and heading us towards an interactive relationship with AI. And so that's important to keep in mind because as our world changes, and especially with current events, AI and the ability to process data closer to the edge is going to be extremely important. And if you look out there at all the analysts and what they're doing, and there's a lot around that, but the edge is going to be part of our future. And while it's still not quite where we want it to be yet, it's getting closer. And it's going to enable that delivery of more real-time, highly interactive use cases for us. And interconnection is going to be kind of the glue that ties it all together because we're going to be able to deliver data back and forth. From some different sources, specifically Gartner, but they estimate over 50% of enterprise-generated data will be created and processed outside of those traditional data centers. And that's going to be at the edge. And over 20% of new industrial control systems, which will include all of your analytics and your AI edge, inference capabilities, and the ability to improve our productivity will be out there also. And then, of course, you can read the rest. Greater than 50% of all of our IoT projects will have containers, whether it's Kubernetes or something else that gets developed out at the edge. And of course, at least 50% of our high-end industrial IoT gateways are going to need to have that operational option for 5G. And that's going to be important because it allows a different level of service than we've had in the past. So now you can have, wireless, you can have physical connectivity, and then you can have 5G, which will actually be able to deliver low latency connectivity into our endpoints as we go forward. And, the question continues to come up, where is this edge? And Matt talked about it a little bit, and I think that there's still three levels that we go through. We 2 years ago, we started talking about where that edge is. I think this slide is still very relevant. You've got your core that has your hyperscalers. You have your big core environments, your big data, your storage, all of that stuff that's higher latency. They sit out in these tier 1 markets sometimes, even though your edge data may be out in these smaller tier 2, tier 3 type of markets. Then you have near edge data centers, which is where Flexential plays a role. There's a lot of other operators that are in these smaller metros, but these emerging markets like a Denver or a Nashville or some of these other markets that are seeing a lot of data generation going on. And those near edge data centers have a lower latency. They have a little more capacity or a lot more capacity than your micro data centers, but they have less than your hyperscalers. And they're able to take that data that's collected out at the edge and be able to do some more compute. And then when you get out to the edge, whether that's at the bases of cell towers or that's the out into your smart city deployments, into the buildings, into your street lamps and everything that's out there, or into your industry or into the cars, all of that is going to be your far edge. Even mobile devices could be considered a far edge, and that's where its ultra low latency becomes extremely critical. And that's where it's going to actually be where the data is all localized, and it's actually some analysis happens there, and then that communication needs to then flow back and forth between the near edge and the core, and then back down to the edge. So it's important to kind of keep that hierarchy in place. That's where we sit, and a lot of times people get a little confused, but I truly believe you have your core, your near edge, and your edge environments that sit out there, and it builds an entire ecosystem. And that ecosystem really helps us enable all of those things that we're interested in, whether it's rich sensors, health monitors, et cetera, all of those machines and endpoints from autonomous transportation, your compute. There's it's really apparent when you look at places like AWS are now building outposts that are these edge compute that can go on-prem or at micro data centers. Your multi-edge access, which will be driven by 5G, of course, and then all of your embedded compute, which Matt was talking about, and then your gateways and your edge data centers like the Edge Micros or Vapor IOs and those folks that are doing that. And it's really going to be driven by emerging technology. Emerging technologies that are going to utilize the edge are really around that artificial intelligence. AI is rapidly being deployed out at the edge. Smart cities, visual AI. I'm really get enthralled by visual AI, the ability to take, visual aspects of either a human or things that are occurring and make quick decisions on that are really intriguing to me. I think that's where a lot of our technology is going to be driven, but it produces a lot of data that's got to be processed. And taking that data and trying to carry it all the way back to the core may not always be the best issue. So being able to process that closer to the edge is the way that we want to move forward. And of course, robotics and autonomous vehicles, an autonomous vehicle could travel 60 feet in a second. So having some quick decisions that may not be available on that autonomous vehicle, but in a closer edge environment based on things that are going around in that environment that are not happening inside that vehicle could be really important. Of course, we have Internet of Things, and it's continually to exponentially grow the billions of IoT devices out there. And they're going to create massive amounts of data that just continues to drive edge-related connectivity needs. And about 95% of that data is not going to be of value. But that 3 to 5% that is of value needs to have some quick decisions made about what to do with that data, whether we transport that data back or we actually act on that data right out at the edge. I've done some talks about data is the new gold, and it's really important that all of this sensor data and all this AI data is treated like gold, because we need to take that and decide what we want to do it, and it becomes a precious commodity. And if you don't believe that, just go out and do any type of search on travel or anything going on, and you'll see social media and other aspects start to share news stories with you or travel options, et cetera. And because that data is being mined and it's actually being made available to folks that want to use that data to help you sometimes get the information you need. And then, of course, 5G and mobile computing, that's going to just change the way that we look at our connectivity. And it's providing that whole new generation of our ability to connect and reach to our customers. And it's going to really drive a more mobile and retail economy. So, we heard a little bit about retail, but, think about really mobile points of sale, whether it's in a stadium or it's a food truck, et cetera. Those things are going to really see a huge uptick in our amount of traffic that we can bring into our networks when 5G gets rolled out and with all the advances in that mobile computing. And even in today's environment, that's becoming even more relevant and more important to us. And of course, containers, distributed cloud and compute, the increasing adoption of containerization and distributed microcompute and cloud, it's going to make it possible for us to run these apps at the edge like we've never done before. That's one of the difficult parts. How do we get out there? But, Kubernetes is a huge advantage of being able to deploy out closer to the edge and be able to do a lot of things that 2 years ago we would have never thought possible. And so with all that being said, I went out and grabbed a few of the recent Edge updates. I stay really involved in the Edge. I do a lot of speaking and a lot of interaction with different folks. And, here are some that I think are really relevant to where the Edge is going. Amazon acquired a firm which really allows them for a 5G platform to do edge delivery. That's important because that says that, even Amazon sees the need to move closer and closer to the edge. And I like to use Amazon as a good example for edge deployments because Amazon learned a long time ago if they wanted to change the way that we shop and get packages delivered to us, they couldn't do everything from one central location. They had to move closer and get those distribution points out into the metro areas. So every major metro area has an Amazon distribution so that they can do that 2-day or 1-day delivery to us. That's the same thing that Edge is going to do, but now that we move into the world of 5G and stuff, it even helps us more with getting data down into that to that low latency, couple millisecond type of deployment. Google's invested, they're teaming up with AT&T to do some 5G Edge solutions. Supermicro is really accelerating their AI and deep learning with NVIDIA to get, out there closer to the edge. Of course, Cloudflare working. Cloudflare, if you're unfamiliar, they're a CDN. They provide a lot of content out there. They're working with Edge Micro and Vapor.io to bring that content even closer to the edge for us. Both Vapor and Edge Micro have gotten new investments in the past year to continue to grow and to continue to deploy out at the edge. CenturyLink announced that they were going to work on converting their COs to edge sites. They have, hundreds, if not thousands of COs out there that they could actually probably convert. It's going to be a challenge with some of the things going on out there, but I think it's the right move for them. And then, of course, the ones that I really think have a huge advantage on being able to deploy out to the edge are your tower operators, because edge sometimes is a real estate play, and your tower operators have a lot of real estate in your the edge of your metros and your rural areas where you need that ultra low latency to be able to deliver services. And, a lot of questions, I've been getting a lot of questions and a lot of things around how is Edge going to be, what's the future of it, but also what is it in today's crisis? How has COVID-19 impact the Edge deployment? And if we've all read the reports, internet traffic has hit record levels, right? And employees are working over the same bandwidth as household kids playing video games, streaming videos or music, and students, with online classes. And, all of that is putting some pressure on our networks. And we know that we're doing well with it, but it still has some issues that we need to make sure we can overcome. And I believe that we're going to come out of this crisis with a much more mobile workforce, which means that now Edge is going to be even more important to us as we start realizing that we can work and be efficient at home or in mobile environments. And, latency and bandwidth needs are increasing as we do that. So moving closer to the edge can alleviate a lot of that. Can alleviate some of those congestion points, allow us more flexibility, allows us to do a lot more response and AI out there closer to it. And so I believe with 5G development, CDNs and AI and sensors and IoT processing at the edge, we can help with any future crisis that makes us more mobile and makes us, gives us that ability to work closer to our home environment, or not have to travel to do even conferences or presentations or concerts, et cetera. All of that is changing, and we see all of that changing nowadays. And then, the most important one, though, is those life-saving health sensors and monitors will be able to leverage the edge. And so having a conversation with some folks this past week, we do a lot with some healthcare agencies and stuff, but we were talking about, folks are now restricted from going into the doctor, but they could do all of their health monitoring, health sensors, can do a telemedicine type of environment straight from their home and get answers right away. But you also could have all of that being driven by AI that's actually, alerting or giving responses closer to the edge without having to have all that data transfer back and forth over miles and miles and lower latency and not get the answers you need immediately. And, one of the things that, it was mentioned a little bit in the earlier conversation, and I've had a couple of conversations on this and a couple of, different presentations, and there's a lot of questions around, will edge replace the core in the cloud? And I believe that it won't. I believe it's going to be complementary. I believe that, while edge will become more and more proliferant out there in our environments and will be more available to folks, you're still going to need a need for that core. I mean, the core is going to have a higher latency, but that hyperscale capacity for multi-megawatt type of deployments is not going to be just suddenly gone and moved out to the edge. You've got, a lot of costs that come with trying to build these large data centers. So your public clouds, your big data, your storage, all of that requires multi-megawatt type of deployments. And so the core is still going to be extremely relevant. And add on top of that support, security, and reliability that you get at the core that you won't get out of the edge, it becomes even more important to us. And then your near edge is still that kind of in-between glue that's really important to us. So it's in-region capacity for the mid to large size compute deployments, 3 to 5 megawatts sometimes, and managing a lot of analytics and edge cloud and gaming and data collection, that you're just not going to be able to put at your micro data center sites or out into a factory or out into a small business. It's going to be highly connected services that you're not going to get at those micro data centers either. Multiple carriers are going to be built into there, multiple fiber, cloud connectivity, peering exchanges. All of that stuff is still going to be very important for these near edge data centers and for all of this traffic to be able to traverse our networks and to be able to go back and forth and for people to share data. And of course, it still has all those on-site support, security, and reliability features that you may not find out at your far edge. And then, your far edge deployments are designed for those small, concentrated footprints. Matt even talked about it. You want to make them as small and efficient as possible. Those data centers are going to be between 6 to 9 to maybe even as big as 12 racks. But that's not the goal, is to make a data center out there at the edge. It's to make them small and efficient. And you're going to see about 200 kilowatts. You can't get a large deployment under 200 kilowatts. You want to keep that to be as small and efficient as possible. You're going to see some micro clouds out there. Outposts can be a one cabinet type of deployment. CDNs, 2 to 3 type of cabinets out there. Some data ingress and egress on those containers. But again, back to that limited space and power and limited connectivity, which means you need the entire ecosystem and that hierarchy that moves it back and forth between edge and core. And this just kind of reiterates that, at your core, you've got all of these different services: big data, batch analysis, your disaster recovery, your archival storage that'll sit out there. And then at the edge, you're going to have, all your real-time data processing, your low latency communication at 2 to 5 milliseconds, as we talked about, 5G ingress, egress points, and interactive applications. And all of them are going to flow back and forth. And it's going to be a constant interconnection play that really makes this an entire solution versus one size and trying to make it all fit. And and data is not one size, right? I mean, it's depending on the application and what we're doing, that data has different needs. And whether it's smart cities or visual AI and manufacturing, even safety or health monitors or autonomous vehicles and gaming and retail, all of that plays a key role in what we're doing. But all of it has some different data needs and different security and different requirements. And the key to all of that is interconnection. Being able to move that data from an edge site back to a core site, to save it, to do some analytics on it, to do deep data inspection on that, and then be able to drive those answers and that key back to the edge is what's important. And when I go back to and talk about data is the new gold, think about it in that way. Gold in its raw form isn't that valuable either. But when you manipulate it and you make it into something fantastic, people really want it, and the value goes up, tenfold. Data is the same way. Out there in that raw form, it's nothing but a lot of information. But you take that back, you do some analytics on it, you figure out what that's really telling you and what the story, and then you can turn around and use that data to help improve your business, to help improve your sales, to help improve the way that your AI responds. That's where the keys come to, and that's where it becomes a really rich environment for us. And I can go through several examples that I think that it's really important. One of the examples I like to use a lot of times is around health. I'm really tied into that, especially, it's even more apparent nowadays, but, there are health monitors out there that actually can sit there and predict when a SUDEP occurrence is going to happen and actually alert somebody. And so, understanding all of that data and making that prediction isn't going to happen on that smart device. It's going to be the alert and the monitoring, the sensor on that smart device. But that data that goes back into our networks and can be gone back into a large core environment where thousands and thousands, if not millions of instances are recorded, and then the right response is then, acted upon at the edge that helps a person make the right decision to possibly save a life. That's where I think that, the really noble effort from delivering data back and forth becomes really important to us and can be life-saving. And then, why is all this important? So edge development, it's still in progress, right? There's a lot of activity, and it's not necessarily super complex, but it is hard. It does take time. It does take some really thought-provoking folks to get engaged and decide how they're going to deploy out closer to the edge. Providers, social media, healthcare, smart cities, they all have different needs and use cases. So it goes back to that one data isn't one size fit all. It's really around trying to figure out what we're going to do to make that valuable to that industry and to that type of environment that we want to build. And so the important part there to think about is that as we continue to go down that road, a person that's helping consult on moving data to the edge is going to have to be very flexible in how they look at the requirements, because every one of these edge use cases has significantly different requirements. Some of them don't need the ultra-low latency, but they need that connection to get back and use the big data and big analytics. Some of these need ultra-low latency. They need to have decisions made right on the edge. And so trying to figure that out is going to be the important part as we move forward. And then that lower latency combined with access to greater services, as I talked about, really brings that hybrid approach to allow those customized solutions. And so I think that's why sometimes we start to see a little pause on some of our edge deployments, because we get into it and we try to make this one data set fit everybody, and then we realize that, to really make this successful, we've got to back up and customize it. And then all of that data needs to be analyzed and stored, and whether it requires, transport back to the core compute or public clouds, or whether some of it is just dumped at the edge because it's just, not that valuable to us, that's the decisions we've got to start making too. We've got to start changing our architectures to be able to really adopt to the way that we want to move down that road. And then, so at Flex Central, our approach to hybrid edge is really what we've laid out here. We've got the edge compute or the micro data centers that sit out at the edge of, rural areas where a lot of IoT and sensors, or even sit into manufacturing environments, or sit at the base of cell towers. And all of that data is going to come back into those for ingress, egress, and quick analytics, and then transporting that data back into either a Flex Central edge data center or a carrier hotel, and then using a backbone to get back to your core data centers and, of course, all your hyperscaler and public clouds. At Flex Central, we actually run our own backbone between our 40 data centers. We use that to move a lot of data back and forth for customers that have multiple deployments into those near-edge data centers. So we have a lot of customers that will put 3 to 4 to 5 deployments out there in multiple metro areas across our 21 regions where we're at. That allows them to use a semi-distributed type of deployment mechanism, whether it's object store, et cetera. And then we bring all those services and can deliver them back and forth. And I think that's the key, is whether it's us or someone else, delivering services that can't be out at the edge because of the size, the scale, or the security requirements is extremely important to the whole edge ecosystem as we build it. And so that's why I constantly talk about being able to deliver data back and forth, and interconnection is being the key on that. So in summary, we're in a connected world, And network-enabled co-location is a key. Being able to drive connectivity between that, those different deployments is really where the real ecosystem becomes one huge giant cloud computer throughout the world. AI and IoT, as we spoke about, and 5G are changing the world as we know it, and they're going to drive the edge development as we've seen. Advances in technologies like the micro data center field or expansion of edge CDNs and edge cloud, they've set the stage for edge to become its own. And we're seeing that now. We're starting to finally see deployments happen. We're starting to finally see momentum pick up in the edge deployment world. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more development move forward, and especially when we start to see a more mobile, economy going around. And our analysts predict like 2022, as we spoke about, 50% of that data will be created outside of those traditional data centers, and that's going to be out at the edge. And then the edge, it's not going to replace the cloud. It will complement the cloud and core deployments by interconnection and by bringing that data between the two, as I continue to emphasize. And then the last one is just developing a full fabric of edge data centers to distribute and receive that edge from multiple locations is an important part of any successful edge strategy. So really stepping back from everything. Where have we come in 2 years with the edge? So we've actually, seen a lot of development. While it hasn't been deployed as fast as some folks may have thought, I truly believe we're at the cusp of seeing edge development become on its own and start to drive a lot of technologies. And the technologies out there are going to drive it, and so it becomes a complementary ecosystem as we build that together. All right, that's a quick overview. Hopefully it's information that's important to you and you get something out of it. Let's open up for some questions and answers.
Absolutely. Yeah, great presentation, Tim. While we do that, I'm going to bring up this poll question for the audience that just says, what additional information would you like about FlexCentral? And we can leave that up while we do some Q&A. Let's see, Marcus said nice points on the COVID effect, so good feedback on that. There's a couple questions here that kind of ask you to predict the future. I don't know if you want to get out your crystal ball and try that. But they're saying, a lot of analysts talk about quantum computing as the future. Do you think that edge and quantum computing, will coexist or complement each other? Any thoughts on that?
So I actually do. So I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and I do believe that quantum computing is a edge play. It is that ability to deliver data, and it's going to complement each other quite a bit. It's going to be a long time before we see quantum computing really start to have serious impacts on some of the developments. It's taken us 2 years just to get to where the edge is really becoming relevant. But I do believe that they'll complement each other, and I'm excited about it. I think there's so many advantages that we can do, and when we start talking about AI and quick decisions and stuff, I think that's where we're going to see some real strength in it.
Okay, excellent. And another thought-provoking question here. Ranjan said, today mainframes run 30 billion transactions a day, more than Google. So when we talk about edge, who do you see the integration, or where do you see the integration with legacy mainframe? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, that's perfect. So, I spent a lot of time at Schwab years ago, and we, of course, run mainframes because financial institution, but we needed to improve our response time to trades and our latency. And one of the things we did was early years edge deployments of getting closer to the exchanges and then transporting that data back to those mainframes. And so as I talk about core computing will not go away, that's where I see the delivery between those two are important. Now, the difference is the fact that the edge play will be those quick decisions, that quick either analytics or decision or that quick input of data. The long-term transaction stuff will occur still in your mainframes or in your large compute environments or your hyperscaler clouds. You're just not going to replace that. Now, as we move forward, smaller chunks of that might move closer to the edge, depending on that, but you've got security concerns, you've got a lot of issues around managing and manipulating and a lot of data sets that are occurring. And we do know that from a financial standpoint, a lot of that still runs more efficiently in a mainframe type environment that's built for that. So I don't think I think they're complementary. I don't think that there's any issue on that. I think back to the same point, interconnection, being able to drive that data back and forth and make some quick decisions at the edge, but then send that data back to where you actually do some work is going to be the key around that.
Okay. And Charles said that's a great example of edge deployment and the importance of interconnectivity there. So good feedback. Eric is asking, is the edge technology software and hardware infrastructure at a remote site, or both, or how's that work?
Oh, it's definitely a both. I mean, I think software-driven technologies will be the dominant play out there, but you're going to have to still run them on some efficient hardware. And that's where I talked about containers are going to drive a lot of that. Efficient, highly, small form factor, highly efficient hardware out at the edge is going to be the key. You can only do so much, though. So you're going to have software that's going to be able to take some quick action on that and make those decisions on what you dump and what you send back to your near edge data centers or your core. And then also, you're going to need to do a lot of automation. You're going to have a lot of responses out there because you're not going to have people in these edge data centers. You're going to have to do everything remotely. So I think it's going to be software driven, but you're still going to be based on certain hardware platforms that are going to help you do that. I talk about one of the examples is the EGX platform from NVIDIA announcing that's an edge deployed, high GPU type of environment that's going to be closer out to the edge. So it is on a hardware platform, but it's going to help you with software type of deployment.
Okay, nice. Matthew's asking, are tower owners already being utilized for edge computing, and if so, what verticals?
So tower owners are, as I mentioned, they have the retail space, and that's one of the key environments out there closer to the edge. Are they being utilized? Of course they're being utilized, because even in the environments of the mobile providers and stuff, they put small deployments out there at the edge to manage their own specific type of edge environments. But I think the tower companies have that leverage to go out there and to develop or work with the edge micros or the vapors or some of those edge players to put this closer to them. What was the second part of the question?
What verticals? I think you answered that, though.
Oh, yeah.
Retail.
So, and the verticals are going to do it's going to be across the board. We've done a lot of work with this, and really I could go through everything from it's everything that's out there, whether it's healthcare, whether it's retail with the mobile retail and autonomous traffic and smart cities. That's where that retail. That's where that space is out there, and so they're already involved in all of it. And it's going to come down to back to where we talked about one data does not fit all. It's going to come back down to the application. Where do you need it? So there may be applications where you want to put it in 20 different markets, and there may be a few where just in 5 different markets is enough, as long as you're within certain latency requirements and where your customers are.
Okay, excellent. We got a couple more questions, but I brought up this slide here on the free ebook that everyone can download, Take Data to the Edge. That's by Tim Parker. You might know him, today's speaker, and Jason Carlone, both from Flexential. So you can click on the link on the screen right there and actually download it. Or if you go to the Handouts tab, it's also available for download there. You can get the full PDF of the ebook. So make sure that you don't go away from the event today without doing that. Another question they're asking, why has adoption to the edge been as slow as it has if it's so advantageous?
I think the key there is the fact that people are still, slowly migrating out closer to the edge. So while they're coming from your tier 1 heavy hyperscaler cores out to the near edge, that's difficult, and it takes time and it takes adjustments into it. And so I think a lot of that is really because a lot more emphasis has been put around managing the big data sets that are going to the public cloud and getting that data. But as we start to see the analytics from that data, we're starting to see people put a lot of investment. Part of that has also been around the fact that it's resource intensive to re-architect your deployments. So, we spent a lot of time in the early 2000s of taking our distributed worlds and collapsing them back down into these big data center environments, and it didn't happen overnight, and the edge is the same way. A little bit slower than we thought. We expected things to kind of be in that hockey stick ramp this year. Of course, environments and stuff are changing, so we'll see how that, when we come out of this crisis, how things start to accelerate. And I think we'll start to see the kind of hockey stick acceleration coming out of this crisis, where people are really, it's not just good enough anymore. Now you've got to be out at the edge. It's got to be better. You've got to have a lower latency. You've got to have this ability to manage your data closer to your customers.
Okay, excellent. And then probably the final question we have time for, and that is, I mean, if someone out there has a project or a use case or a challenge they're facing, does Flex Central have like experts that walk them through that and assist, or how does that work?
Yep. Yeah, we're unique as a data center operator that we do have a professional services team that deal a lot with everything from migrating data to the clouds to working on edge deployments. And we put some, the taking data to the edge, Gorilla Guide actually has some real life use cases where we've helped some of our customers figure out how to get closer to the edge, whether it's MLB or healthcare, et cetera. So we've been very active in working with our customers on that. And so, of course, you can ping us and we can do that, or there's a lot of consulting companies out there that can help with that too. And we do have, I just mentioned real quick, if you go to the Flex Central site, there is a kind of the first primer that we took a white paper, and it was actually hybrid edge computing, and gives you more data on some of the stuff I talked about, what the edge really is. And so that's available to folks also. If they want to go out to the Flex Central site, you should be able to request that from there.
Okay. And in fact, I just put the link to that, excuse me, I put the link to that out in the questions box there for everyone. If you want to click on that link, that'll take you to part 1 of the Gorilla Guide on the hybrid edge computing. So, all right. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for Q&A today, but thank you so much for being on the event today, Tim.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you to Flex Central for supporting today's Edge EcoCast. Of course, check out the Gorilla Guide there on the screen. Click on the link. Check out the handout that's available. Visit flexcentral.com. Thank you, of course, to Scale Computing as well for supporting today's event. I had a great time. I learned a lot. I hope that you did too. Before we go, I want to award the final 2 gift cards. Those are 2 Amazon $500 gift cards, and they're going, the first one is going to Eric Rise from South Dakota. Congratulations. And the second one is going to Oscar Castaneda from Michigan. Congratulations. Eric Rise from South Dakota and Oscar Castaneda from Michigan. Before you go, I want to remind you to check out the 10 on Tech podcast. It's available over in the iTunes store. That's where we interview some of the most innovative people in technology in roughly 10 minutes. If you would be interested in sponsoring an upcoming event, if you're a potential technology provider who wants to present on one of these events, just reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And finally, last slide, I promise, I want to remind everyone to join us next week because we are doing a huge event on enabling public, private, hybrid, and multi-cloud adoption and migration. This is one of our big megacast events with Nutanix, SolarWinds, Cohesity, Firemon, NetApp, Rubrik, Datrium, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Robin, and Zerto will have some amazing prizes. And as soon as we end today's webcast, you'll be automatically redirected to our events homepage, and feel free to register for this event. I hope to see you there. It's next Wednesday at noon Eastern. Thank you, everyone, again, for joining us on today's Enabling Edge Environments EcoCast. I hope you had a good time, and we will see you next time. Take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.